It was September of 1944, and a downed Navy pilot floated at the mercy of the Japanese ships surrounding the Pacific Bonin Islands. Having completed his mission, his aircraft was hit and set on fire, having no choice but to drift. As the Japanese vessels headed toward the pilot's raft, friendly fighters from his squadron repelled them, buying the pilot more time to be rescued. Exhausted, the young man remained alone in the vastness of the ocean, awaiting his rescue, or whatever destiny had stored for him. Then, 4 hours later, the dehydrated pilot saw an apparition in the distance. It looked like a submarine, a Japanese submarine. When the boat finally reached him, the pilot realized it was USS Finback and her crew, and he breathed a sigh of relief. Little did they know that the pilot would live to become the 41st President of the United States. GATO-CLASS. At a time when the U.S. Navy aimed to harness the full power of a vessel to destroy larger and more expensive battleships, submarines still did not meet their promised potential. However, taking from a whole lineage of engineering developments, the Navy would set out to build a proper submarine fleet, one that could not only keep up with the entire fleet, but even take on scouting roles. Continuing with the World War II tradition, the GATO-CLASS submarines were named after a marine creature, a species of cat shark. The class was launched from 1941 to 1943 and became the first mass-produced submarine type of the period. Stemming from the exceptional Tambor and Gar classes, the GATO-CLASS would be so vast that, together with its successors, the Belau and Tench classes, it would make up the bulk of the U.S. Navy's submarine fleet during the war. The class featured simple yet significant changes from its predecessors, as these submarines were considerably longer and had an increased calculated strength pressure hull that allowed deeper dives. Likewise, its engine room was split into two for damage control purposes and could operate on half the power in case of emergency. In addition, at 311 feet 8 inches long, the GATO-CLASS was almost the longest one of its time, and with a submerged displacement of nearly 2.5 tons, it had a tremendous operational range. Still, the class was not among the most agile vessels. Purpose. The GATO-CLASS offered enormous advantages in terms of crew comforts, such as air conditioning, refrigerated food storage, and more capable freshwater distilling units that improved crew conditions and fatigue. Hence, such submarines would often conduct patrols for well over 2 months, showing substantial range and effective crew performance. After 2 decades of trial and error, the GATO-CLASS became the country's first entirely successful fleet submarine design. Unlike the first batch of her class, that was powered by the unreliable Hooven-Owens-Rentschler double-acting diesel engine, later submarines were given a Fairbanks-Morse 38D 8 1/8 9-cylinder opposed piston machine. Hardy and rugged, the new engine allowed them to travel at 21 knots on the surface, while the batteries got them to 9 knots when submerged. In terms of armament, the vessels were initially fitted with 6 forward and 4 aft torpedo tubes for 24 torpedoes. Besides, they were given 40mm Bofors and 20mm Oerlikon autocannons for anti-aircraft warfare. Still, the first successful fleet submarines would not fulfill their intended role in the war. After the Pearl Harbor attack, the Japanese destroyed the U.S. battle line, and a fleet submarine was deemed unnecessary. Nevertheless, the GATO-CLASS submarines made the most of their endurance, speed, and armament, and along with its successor, the model formed the core of the submarine service that destroyed the Japanese merchant marine and a considerable portion of the Imperial Japanese Navy during the global conflict. USS Finback was one of them. Finding her stride. Launched in early February of 1941, USS Finback was not commissioned until after the attack on Pearl Harbor in early 1942. After shakedown training, the submarine's first assignment was to patrol the surroundings of Hawaii during the legendary Battle of Midway. Still, her first war patrol wouldn't begin until June 9th, when she was deployed to the Aleutians. There, she was tasked with 2 special missions, including reconnaissance and surveying operations. Finback eventually sailed to the coasts of Taiwan for her second patrol, and on October 14th, she sank her first enemy vessel, the transport Taisun Maru. During the following month, the submarine would harass several Japanese ships, damaging and sinking at least 3 of them. The vessel would sink another enemy patrol boat during a third sting in early 1943. And on the 4th patrol, she scouted shipping lanes between Rabaul and Japan's mainland, stalking enemy convoys and enduring fierce retaliation, but emerging unscathed. Finback also finished the job USS Tunney had started and launched a torpedo into the bowels of a strike enemy ship, which turned out to be Suwa Maru. She then patrolled enemy shipping lanes towards the Marshall Islands and sank 3 other ships before her 6th patrol in Java, where she sank 2 cargo freighters and damaged a merchant, 2 small mine planters, and an inter-island steamer. Finback's journey then took her to the unwelcoming South China Sea, where she sank a large tanker, a fishing trawler, and hampered another enemy vessel. It was during her 7th period that Finback was assigned a little-known yet highly dangerous mission. She would conduct lifeguard duties and rescue downed pilots in enemy-infested waters. Rendezvous. The campaign in the Bonin Islands was launched in August of 1944. Then, on September 2nd, the recently promoted 19-year-old Lieutenant Junior Grade George Herbert Walker Bush boarded his aircraft on USS San Jacinto and took off alongside 3 other bombers from Torpedo Squadron 51. The group flew to the island of Chichijima with orders to neutralize an important radio tower on the island. Upon arriving, the Americans were met by heavy anti-aircraft fire, and not long after, Bush was hit. The intrepid man realized his aircraft was ablaze and his cockpit full of smoke, but he did not leave until he made sure to hit the tower. Only then did he turn to his mothership and glide through the air before being forced to bail out. The pilot then hit the water and, luckily enough, found an inflatable life raft near him. After assembling the raft and climbing on it, he discovered that his streak of luck had just ended. The strong winds and currents quickly pushed him towards the enemy-occupied island, with the Japanese quickly spotting him and immediately sending boats to take him prisoner. However, his Air Force compatriots soon repelled the Japanese vessels and allowed the downed pilot to paddle away. USS Finback had sailed that morning to support the American pilots raiding Chichijima. Guided by her combat air patrol escorts, 2 F-6F Hellcat fighters, the submarine set out to rescue so-called Zoomies, or downed airmen. It was 9:30 a.m. when Finback received a report of a downed torpedo bomber between the northeastern end of Minamijima and the southern tip of Chichijima. The submarine then traveled 7.5 miles from the shore to keep clear of the enemy's range. 2 hours later, the crew finally sighted the exhausted Zoomie and managed to pull him out. That man would eventually become the last U.S. president to serve his country in battle. Unusual tactics. Later that afternoon, another report came in of a downed pilot near Hahajima. An aircraft then circled overhead to mark the exact location, but the situation was grim. The raft, 1.5 miles from the shore, was under Japanese fire. The skipper, Lieutenant Commander Robert R. Williams, voiced the feelings of the crew when he said, quote, "Spirits of all hands went to 300 feet. The rescue called for a creative solution, one that would not put the submarine at risk. While submerged, it took Finback no less than 3 hours to locate the downed pilot and approach him. Then, at 55 feet and with a periscope up, the vessel roared to get the pilot's attention and let him know that help had arrived. The pilot immediately hooked his arms around the periscope, and the submarine accelerated to 2/3 speed. Still, the pace filled the raft with water and eventually dumped the passenger. Finback then raised to give him more space to hold onto, but not enough to expose the vessel completely. The submarine finally surfaced only 5 miles from the shore, and the crew helped the waterlogged but safe Ensign James W. Beckman inside. Legacy. During Finback's last 2 patrols, she sank one last freighter, but saw little action towards the end of the war. The Japanese then surrendered while she was stationed at Pearl Harbor for an overhaul. For the next few years, Finback was used to train young submariners, and there was also an attempt to convert the ship into a radar picket to provide long-range radar cover for the whole fleet. However, despite receiving a rudimentary conversion, she was never used in this role. USS Finback was finally decommissioned in 1950, having received 13 battle stars for her service during the war. 9 out of her 12 war patrols were deemed successful, and she sent 59,383 tons of Japanese shipping to the bottom of the ocean throughout her career. She also saved the lives of several pilots, inadvertently playing an incredibly crucial role in the future of the United States of America. Thank you for watching our video. Don't forget to check out all our Dark Documentaries channels for more epic stories from the world's wars and oceans, and hit the bell icon to be notified of our newest content. Stay tuned.